Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, my dear students. It's really my pleasure to extend a cheerful welcome to you all. So I hope all of you okay. And in this lecture, as you see, English literature, Anglo-Saxon or Old English period. This is chapter number 2. And before we go to chapter number 2, let me remind you about the previous lecture, which we discussed the introduction to English literature. We also discussed, definition of literatures. We also talk about importance of literature in English. I also discussed the kinds of literatures, and finally the elements of the story fictions. So today we will go and discuss the contents of chapter number 2. First of all, I'll give you the Anglo-Saxon or Old English period. This is number 1. 2, the Beowulf. 3, the Christian writers of the Anglo-Saxon period, Kidman in 7th century, Sinolf in 8th century, then Alfred 848 up to 901. So today, now I'll discuss first of all what we mean by Anglo-Saxons or Old English period. In this sections, I'll discuss the life and the name and also Anglo-Saxon literatures. I mean old literatures and poetry in section number 1. 2, I'll discuss also with you Beowulf. And in Beowulf here, then I discuss it as the first and Old English epic. Then Beowulf and its main features, the main features of Beowulf, I'll discuss with you. The third, I mean here by the Christian writers of the Anglo-Saxons like Kidman now in 7th century, and Sinol and Alfred here. I mean these Christians here. I chooses the three or the major three of them. Which is the greatest, let me see, the greatest three writers, and we will discuss here their life, work, and also their main achievements together. So therefore, let's move to the first slides here and to see the Anglo-Saxons here. I mean the name. What is the origin of Anglo-Saxon's name? The name, as you see, of Anglo-Saxon denotes 2 of the 3 Germanic tribes. Now, Jutes and Angles and Saxons. What does it mean? It means now, originally, let me see, the name Anglo-Saxons denotes here about the middle of the 5th century exactly. They left their homes on the shore of the North Sea and the Baltic to conquer and colonize, then go to distant in Britain. England exactly was the home of one tribe, and the name still clings to the spot. Let me say, when some of their forefathers sailed on their momentous voyage. So the old Saxon word Anglo means here a hook, and the English verb of angle is used invariably by Walton and older writers in the sense of fishing. So we may still think, therefore, of the first angles as hookmen, possibly because of their fishing, more probably because the shore where they live. Let me say, so the name Saxon from Sax, a short sword, means the sword man. So here from the name we may judge something of the temper of the hardy fighters who preceded the Angles into Britain. So the Angles here were the most numerous of the conquering tribes, and from them the new home was called England. By gradually it changes this and became the first England and then England. Then the name becomes England. So when we see English, maybe derived from England, and England derived from Anglo, and so on. This is the first name or the origins of Anglo-Saxon or Old English period. Let's move to the next slide here and see Anglo-Saxon literature, Old English literature. Encompasses literatures written in Anglo-Saxons Old English during the 600 years Anglo-Saxon period of Britain from the mid-5th century to the Norman conquest. So here we see these words include genres such as, let me say, epic, hagiography, sermons, Bible translations, legal work, chronicles, riddles, and others. So therefore, in all there are about 400 surviving manuscripts from the period, a significant corpus of both popular interest and specialist research. So let me say, some of the most important works from this period include the poem Beowulf, which has achieved national epic status in Britain. So the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is a collection of early English history. The poem Kidman's Hymn from the 7th century is one of the oldest surviving written text in English. So therefore, Anglo-Saxon literature has gone through different periods of research. In the 19th century and early 20th century, the focus here was on the Germanic roots of English. So later, the literary merits were examined, and today the interest is with the paleography questions and the physical manuscripts themselves, such as dating, place of origins, and looking at the connections between Anglo-Saxons cultural and the rest of Europe in the Middle Age. So this is some introductions about Anglo-Saxon literatures or old literature. Now, if we look here, we find Anglo-Saxon society. Anglo-Saxon society divided into two classes. One is the ruling classes, as you see, and the second is the serving classes. About 1 and 2, here Anglo-Saxon really, we can see the ruling classes and serving classes, or bondsmen, let me say, descendants of captives of the tribes. So the king at that time was absolutely ruler here. Ruler, and also, although in his decisions he relied, let me say, on the advice of his council of wise men. So Anglo-Saxon society centered on the mid-hall, where poets or parrots, as they say, sang the stories of brave heroes and their deeds. So this tradition of oral literatures can be seen today in Beowulf, which we will discuss later. So the only full length of Old English epic in existence, which I mean here Beowulf. So this is some introductions about Anglo-Saxon literature or Old English literatures, and also the society of Anglo-Saxons. Now let me talk about the Anglo-Saxons poetry. Anglo-Saxon poetry, or as they say, Old English poetry, here heroic Germanic, pre-Christians, and the Christians. What does it mean? First of all, the Old English poetry can be identified, as you see, in one of the two styles. The first is the heroic here, which based, I mean here by heroic, which based in pre-Christians or Germanic myth, and the Christians here, which paraphrase biblical narrative in verse. Although very little of the Old English poetry survives, which does exist in or is considered by authorities to be high literary equality. So a Christian poetry began to appear around the maybe 7th century with Kidman and the subsequent. Now, if you look here, it has survived for the most part of 4 manuscripts. The first, as you see here, the first manuscript is called the Kidman manuscript. What does it mean? It means that is illustrated poetic anthology here, and then the second is manuscript is called the Exeter book, and I mean here by Exeter, it means a city. It is the name of city in England, exactly on the river here, and also an anthology, and we mean by it that since it was donated there in the 7th century. The third is manuscript is called the Versilli book, and Versilli here also the name of the city in Italy, exactly. All right, and in Italy no one knows, and is a matter of debate. So and here, look at the fourth manuscript is called the Noel Codex. The Noel here is a mixture of poetry and prose. This is something about the Old English poetry. Let us now go to the main characteristics of Anglo-Saxon poetry. The first is resembles Hebrew poetry, indulging in parallelism and metaphorical phrases. The second is full of accent and persistent alliterations. Three, poetry was sung, it was oral. The fourth characteristic is prevalence of compound, where poets sought a condense of qualities of his subjects. And five, diffuse style of writing, no grace, subtleties, and the final six, epic, most favored from poetry. This is the main 6 characteristics of Anglo-Saxon poetry. Now let us move to Beowulf and see what does it mean. Beowulf 1 is the important sections in our chapter, in this chapter number 2. So you have to read it and understand it. Now we mean by Beowulf here, as you see, the greatest Old English poem is Beowulf 1, which belongs to the 7th century. As you see, it is a story of about 3,000 lines, and it is the first English epic. The name of its author is unknown. This is one. If you want to discuss this introductions, we can see that Beowulf deals with the noble hero. If I want to talk about the summary of Beowulf, briefly summary, the noble hero, his name is Beowulf, who managed to kill the monster named Grendel and his mother. So he sailed with 14 words to challenge the monster. He destroyed the fire-breathing dragon monster, and let me say, who was revenging the land. So then he was given, finally, when he died, he was given a stately funeral. So this is as a summary of the Beowulf, and here the main features of Beowulf you have to know that the first one is it was composed in the first half of 8th century. The second is it is an epic created from pagan material but with a Christian spirit. Third is it was composed orally and the only epic existence from Anglo-Saxon period. And here the fourth is it deals with the noble hero. It tells deeds of a brave warrior. And 5 here, it is written in Old English language. So if we want to talk about the main features of Beowulf, we have a question here. The question is why we should study Beowulf. Why we should study Beowulf? You should answer and understand it. Now, it gives, first of all, let me note my answers. It gives us interesting picture of life in those old days. This is number one. Number two, it tells us of fierce fights and brave deeds. This is number two. Number three, if I want to answer about the question why we should study Beowulf, because it describes their life in the hall, the terrible creatures that they had to fight, and their ships and travels. They had a hard life on land and the sea, and they didn't enjoy it much, but they pour it well. So this is the causes or reasons why we should study Beowulf in English literatures, as also as the main or first epic in English literatures. So let us go now to Christian writers of the Anglo-Saxon period. The first one is Kidman. Kidman in 7th century. Kidman is the first poet to whom we can give a definite name of date. Second, he was a poor countryman who used to stay apart when his fellows sang songs to God, for Kidman was uneducated and could not sing. The greatest work attributed to Kidman is the so-called paraphrase. So now here Kidman, if I want to summarize briefly these introductions also, I can see that the literature of his period falls naturally into two divisions. The first is pagan and Christian. About pagan now represents the poetry which the Anglo-Saxon probably brought with them in the form of oral, let me say, novels. So, on the other hand, a Christian here, the second, represent the writings developed under teaching of the monks after the old pagan religions had vanished. So, this is the first writer here, the greatest writer, Kidman. The second here also, the greatest work attributed to Kidman is so-called a paraphrase. Just now we said. Then let us move to another slice here to see Sinolf, 8th century. Sinolf, as you see here, almost certainly wrote 4 poems. Julian, the Fates of the Apostles, Christ, and Ellen. So Sinolf's poems are religious and were probably written in the second half of the 8th century. So this now, briefly introductions about Sinolf. Let me say that also I can add it here that he is the greatest of the Anglo-Saxon poet. Number one, excepting only the unknown authors of Beowulf, we know very little. So the better poems is the dream of the rood for him. The rood here, I mean the Christ's cross. This is among the best of all old English poems by Sinolf. So the most interesting piece of prose is the Anglo-Saxons chronicles an early history of the country. There are in fact several chronicles belonging to different sites for him. So this is what we mean by Sinolf's here. The second is the details of the life of Anglo-Saxon poets. Sinolf flourished 8th or maybe 9th century are shrouded in mystery. What is known is that he was one of the earliest religious poets and wrote beautiful verses steeped in Christian belief. This is what we mean here by the life or a briefly life of the second writer, Sinan. Let us go to the Alfred 848 901 and see what his achievements. First of all, main achievement, his works were mostly religious. He wrote out in Old English the meaning of the first 7 boxes of the Bible. His prose style is the best in Old English. So Alfred was an effective ruler who made his territory a unity country. As you see, this is briefly introductions about him. When we say finally Alfred was an effective ruler who made his territory a united country. So this is what we mean by him. What we can add it, I can add it here that he uses alliteration to join his sentences together. Firstly, no doubt, Alfred had a great influence on this work. So he probably brought the different writings into some kinds of order. He also translated a number of Latin boxes. About his achievement also, he translated these boxes into Old English so that his people could read them. And also, he brought back learning to England and improved the education of his people. So we can summarize one by one his achievements or work that one, he probably brought the different writings into some kinds of order. The second, he translated a number of Latin boxes into Old English. Third, he brought back learning to England and improved the education of his people. This is the main achievements of Alfred Great. And also, he supported Christianity and encouraged education and issued a code of law. So he also built, a fleet of ships and established 45 towns and recognized the army to protect his kingdom from Danes. So this is the main achievements or work of Alfred. So these writers, 3 writers, one by one, Kidman, Sinal, and Alfred, are the greatest writers in Old English period, like as we say Anglo-Saxon period. You have to keep it in your minds and read it because they are important and will be useful for you. Now we come to end this lecture. Until I meet you again, let me say goodbye and see you.